Why do you keep breaking your promises repeatedly? This wasn't what I signed up for. I just wanted a simple life.
You amuse me. Rose, you knew right from the start that I always had political ambitions.
I knew, but I never thought it would change you and control your life. Everything you do, George, is always about your political ambitions.
George stepped out of the house in anger. Rose went back to the bedroom in tears. The next day, she quietly started packing her things and the children's belongings. Rose went back in time to how her relationship with George started. Rose was a simple girl in college, studying crop science. She came from a reserved family that lived in the countryside of Texas. She got into college at a young age. Studying crop science had always been her dream. She was so focused on her studies that relationships were not at the top of her priority. In her third year, she met Zach and decided to give the relationship a try. They attended the same college fellowship. Zach was a final-year medical student, an average-looking guy with great prospects. Zach couldn't stay in the relationship because Rose wanted to remain celibate. Zach was religious but felt sex was very important in a relationship, so they parted ways after a year of dating. Rose decided to stay single until she graduated. One day, while she was reading in her faculty, a guy walked up to her.
Please vote for me as the president of University of Florida State Student Government.
Looking up, she saw a fine guy with the most charming smile. Okay, she answered absent-mindedly, lost in thoughts of how handsome this man was. For the first time, Rose was thinking carnally, wishing that the man could hold her and kiss her. For a few seconds, she was lost in her thoughts. That is the shortest answer I have received, the guy said, smiling and drawn in by her beautiful, dark, flawless skin. The spark between them was enough to start a wildfire.
I really do not have interests in politics.
But you can make a difference by voting for someone with integrity and commitment to the students.
It is difficult to tell who you are. This is my first time meeting you.
Let me tell you a little about myself. My name is George Kingsley, and I'm a senior year student in international relations. I'm soliciting your vote because I possess the qualities needed to lead effectively and make a positive impact. I led the students who raised funds for students who were affected by Hurricane Andrew in 1992. The students were able to get new accommodations and school items like laptops. I started an organization that advocated for students, especially marginalized students. For example, there was a black female student who was sexually harassed by one of the elite students. The elite student's parents tried to bury the case, but our organization fought for the student. Justice was well served. I am a dedicated leader with a strong commitment to transparency and accountability. My communication skills allow me to connect with people from all walks of life, ensuring that every voice is heard. I approach decision-making with fairness and a focus on the common good, always prioritizing the needs of the community. With a clear vision for the future, I am ready to address challenges head-on and create meaningful change. My passion for service, coupled with my ability to unite and inspire others, makes me the right choice for this role. Together, we can achieve great things.
Oh wow. That was more than a little, George. It was impressive. You have an outstanding track record, and for that, I will vote for you.
They both smiled at each other.
What's your name?
My name is Rose, a senior year student in crop science.
Oh, nice.
I hope you win. Good luck.
Trying to break the awkward silence between them, George's eyes were piercing into hers and she could feel the sparks between them.
Thank you, Rose. Hope to see you around.
George said, before leaving. When Rose got home that night, she thought of how handsome George was, which was unlike her. She prayed and hoped God would remove lustful thoughts from her mind. Weeks later, news came out that George had won the election. She was happy for him and glad her vote counted. She started following the school news and updates to see if George was keeping the promises he made to the students in his campaign, and he was. She was hoping one day their paths would cross. One fateful day, George came to their department alongside the president of the university to commission a project. Rose was happy to see George, but he was too distracted to notice her because a lot of ladies wanted to talk to him. She quietly left. Months later, she graduated. She secured a job at the U.S. Government Soil Research Center in Florida. She had a peaceful life, just like she wanted. All she did was go to work, church, library, and her garden. She wasn't under any pressure to start a family. She had just celebrated her 23rd birthday. 5 years later, she was taking a walk in the park on a Wednesday evening when someone whispered in her ear from behind.
Lovely Rose.
When she turned around, she was surprised to see George.
Wow, George, what are you doing here? You remembered me.
They both laughed.
How would I forget the lovely Rose that mesmerized me the first day I set my eyes on her?
Rose smiled shyly. She had butterflies in her stomach all over again, especially knowing that George was still thinking of her.
Rose, I have been looking for you for years. I went to your department to ask about you, but nobody knew you.
I'm a very quiet lady, Rose said. Moreover, most people know me as Abigail in my department.
Oh, I see. How have you been? George asked, in awe of how beautiful she had remained. There was something about her skin that was enthralling.
I've been fine.
Before Rose could finish her sentence, George's phone rang. He excused himself to pick up and answer the call. Rose had to wait for him to finish. 2 minutes later, he came back.
I am sorry. Rose, I have to go. I have an impromptu meeting to attend. I am preparing for an election.
Election? Which position are you contesting for?
The president of the American Bar Association.
Wow, you are doing well for yourself.
Thank you. Rose, I want to see your beautiful face again. Can we go out for dinner sometime this week?
Yeah, sure.
Please, let me have your number.
They exchanged complimentary cards and said their byes. That night, George called Rose, and they spoke for more than 2 hours. The conversation was fluid between them. They enjoyed each other's company on the phone. They went out on the weekend, spending all day together on Saturday. On Sunday evening, George invited Rose to his apartment for dinner to celebrate his new position. George's house was magnificent and breathtaking. Rose, in her yellow gown, stood like a simple goddess in George's living room. Rose was surprised to hear that George had made dinner. He seemed so busy that it felt like he had no time for other things like cooking. They sat to eat baked chicken wings, veggies and potatoes with banana pie for dessert. Rose complimented George's food. It tasted good, and she liked it. They talked for hours over a bottle of red wine. George learned that Rose's parents were in Texas. Her father was a quality engineer in one of the biggest tech firms in the US. Her mother was a professor of agriculture in one of the agricultural and mechanical universities. Her parents had a small-scale farm in Texas. She had a brother who was a software engineer. They were devout Christians. George came from a family of doctors in Arizona. His parents and sister were medical doctors. He was the different one, a licensed lawyer in Florida. He was an occasional Christian who visited church with his family on New Year Day. George told her how she crossed his thoughts every time. He prayed to God for them to cross paths again, and he was so excited to see her taking a walk in the state park beside his office. He always took walks in the park to take off steam whenever he was stressed. Rose told him that she was waiting for her realtor and decided to take a walk. George asked her to be his girlfriend, and she accepted. Though they had different hobbies and goals, they enjoyed each other's company. George was always attending political meetings, clubbing, and media activities, while Rose attended church, charity homes, and farms. One would have thought they were not compatible, but they made it work. During one of the early days of their relationship, Rose visited George. They sat on the couch reminiscing on college life. George could not take his eyes off Rose. He held her hands and his hands moved in a caress, trying to reach other places. Rose was not comfortable and held George's hand gently.
George, I come from a Christian home, and I am a devout Christian too. I do not just go to church, but live by the tenet of my Bible. I am a virgin and intend to remain that way until I get married. I know this might change things between us, and I am okay with whatever you decide.
George was silent for a long time.
Whatever I decide. Are you giving up on us already?
No, George. I just don't want to put you under pressure to decide.
I love you, Rose. I haven't had a relationship without sex. It is something new for me. I am not saying it is going to be easy, but I am willing to give it a try.
George and Rose grew in love. There were days of arguments, especially when George missed their dates because of his political events. However, they always made up. A year later, George proposed to Rose, and they got married in the presence of their family and friends. 1 year into the marriage, George started coming home late. Rose was very understanding because she knew he was a young man trying to build his career. George was politically ambitious. Unknown to Rose, he had plans to run for the number position the President of the United States in the future. Rose would accompany George to his political events even though she wasn't comfortable with them. She loved her peace and quiet. One day, George came home with some news.
Baby, I need to tell you something.
What is it? Hope all is well.
Yeah, I want to run for the U.S. House of Representatives. I've been working on it. My political team gathered signatures on my behalf to run.
Rose was silent for a few seconds.
You've been working on it, and I am hearing this for the first time today.
No, baby. I meant that I was positioned for it. I have experience in politics, law, and leadership. My team thus told me that I have the potential to win in my constituency in Northeast Florida. George replied, "This has been my desire. It is a great avenue to serve my people."
Rose
He
was
added,
silent for a long time before finally responding. I am okay with it. You have always been an amazing leader, and the people are lucky to have you. George was happy. He knew that Rose loved her quiet, and this was a huge sacrifice on her part. As he lifted her in the moment of celebration, Rose added, "Please don't let this keep you away from home. I need you too. I am part of your constituency." They both laughed, and George promised to be there for Rose. As a supportive wife, she was always there for George. George also went to church with her as he promised. As the campaign intensified, George started giving excuses not to go to church. He always claimed he had a lot of work to do. She started going to church on her own. One Sunday evening, Rose confronted George.
The priest is concerned about you, George. It has been 3 Sundays since you attended church service.
"Babe, I'm sorry. I have been so busy for the past few weeks. Running for the U.S. House of Representatives is time-consuming. I will make it up to you. I promise to join you next Sunday."
Is that a promise?
"Yes, baby."
Sunday came. George dressed up and followed Rose to church service. However, he left early when he received a phone call. Rose was angry that George left the service early. She wanted him to balance his time and create time for her. Family was just as important as career. Her anger subsided when she met George making dinner. He decorated their bedroom with flowers. It was their 1-year wedding anniversary yesterday. She thought that he had forgotten and did not bother reminding him. This was the man that he fell in love with, the man that made a genuine effort to make people comfortable and happy around him. George took her hand and led her to the dining room for dinner that he had prepared.
"I know I've been busy lately, baby, but I promise to always make it up to you. I am doing all these for our family and unborn children so that they can have a privileged life.
But George, all I ask for is that you create a balance between your career and family."
I will. Please give me more time. The U.S. House of Representatives election will soon be over. I appreciate your support so far."
Rose smiled and gave him a supportive hug. Rose decided to hold off on having children because George was at the peak of his career, and she didn't want to be the only one taking care of their children. Weeks later, George became so busy that he stopped attending church and started staying out late at night. Rose started confiding in her favorite maternal aunt. Her aunt innocently assumed that George might be cheating on him. Considering how incompatible they are, Rose always dismissed it, saying that she trusted George. George was a man of principles and value. However, when she started seeing less of George, the seed of cheating that was planted in her head grew into a tree. She went through his phone and found nothing suspicious, just conversations about work and politics. One Friday evening, Rose visited George in his office. When she arrived at his office, he was busy with his political team. She felt relieved.
"Baby, what are you doing here?"
I miss my husband and brought him some home-baked cookies.
"Okay, darling. Let me wrap this up and then I can jump on those cookies. I am starving."
George quickly wrapped up the meeting and dismissed his team. He devoured the cookies and his wife in his office. He had been starved of food and love. They both went home together, chuckling like young teenagers in love. From then on, Rose stopped calling her aunt for advice. She kept her marital challenges to herself. George remained busy, but he always tried to make it up to Rose. 2 months later, George was elected to the lower chamber of the United States Congress. The 2 years of his term were challenging for Rose. She was thrust into the limelight. Her family became the subject of media gossip. One day she went out with her cousin for coffee, and it was all over the news that Congressman George's wife was on a date with a man that was not George, insinuating that Rose might be cheating on him. Their different racial backgrounds gave fuel to any sensational news. Some blogs alluded that George, being a white man, might not be able to satisfy Rose. Rose was too embarrassed. She stopped watching the news. George calmed her and told her to ignore the media. George was reelected for the second time. Towards the end of his second term, Rose found out that she was pregnant. Her birth control had failed her. She was uncertain about the future. Due to a complicated pregnancy, she had to change from full-time to part-time at the research center. She was carrying twins. She was no longer considering her dream of owning a medium-scale farm. George was rarely home, always attending one event after another. The problem was that George didn't know how to create a balance between work and family. It was always about work, with the hope that Rose would understand. Rose saw herself living the life of a single woman even though she was married. Rose had been an understanding wife for a long time, until one night when George missed their prenatal appointment, the day they were to find out the gender of their babies. She went alone and found out that they were expecting baby boys. George called Rose to apologize and find out about the appointment, but Rose never responded. George came back home with a rose, approaching the bedside to apologize.
Baby, I'm sorry I couldn't make the appointment. I just had to finish some paperwork, especially since my term as a congressman is coming to an end.
Did you marry me out of love for me? Or did you marry because you thought that it would be easy to manipulate me to give up my dreams while you chase yours?
Babe, where are these questions coming from? I have told you to stay away from those blogs.
Answer the damn questions.
Rose fired angrily.
Rose,
George called her by her name for the first time in a while.
since the very first day I met you, I fell in love with you. I might not be the perfect husband, I have my shortcomings, but one thing is for sure. I love you and adore you.
Rose started crying, and George held her, wiping her tears. They reconciled that night. He promised her that he won't seek re-election for the U.S. House of Representatives. He wanted to be there for her and their babies. George kept his promise. He became less busy and had more time for his family. Rose gave birth to their sons Sam and Larry. George was right beside her. He was actively present in their lives. 2 years later, George decided to run as the governor of Florida, and he told Rose about his plans.
No, George. These past few years have been amazing. I am not ready for the headaches that come with your political career.
Rose vehemently refused.
Baby, you met me as a politician. Do you think I am happy being away from politics?
All I hear is you. Have you asked me what I want to? I have dreams too, George.
Rose said calmly, staying in control of her emotions. They both argued back and forth.
We have children now, so my opinion on your political career is very important. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about our kids too. I am not going to allow you treat them like strangers in the name of politics.
Thank you, Rose. 2 years of staying by your side is not enough to prove to you that I have things under control. What do you want from me?
George fired at her.
Put us first. Is that too hard to ask for?
Rose fired back, unable to keep calm.
Why do you keep breaking your promises repeatedly? This wasn't what I signed up for. I just wanted a simple life, Rose continued.
You amuse me, Rose. You knew right from the start that I always had political ambitions.
I knew, but I never thought it would change you and control your life. Everything you do, George, is always about your political ambitions.
George stepped out of the house in anger. Rose went back to the bedroom in tears. The next day, she quietly started packing her things and the children's belongings. She moved to her parents' home in Texas to live the country life she had always wanted. She resigned at the research center in Florida and worked on her father's farm. When George tried to contact her and begged her to return, she told him she wanted him to focus on his career, while she focused on herself and the boys. George even pleaded with Rose's parents to persuade her to come back home with their sons, but Rose had made up her mind. Though heartbroken, George pressed on with preparations for the governorship election, which was 2 years away. Despite his determination, he constantly missed his family. Alone, he had time to reflect on how much Rose had sacrificed for him, the empty house and the silence gnawed at him. One evening, he returned home and out of habit, called out,
Babe, Sam and Larry, Daddy's home.
Only then did he remember they were gone. This realization deepened his sadness. At work, he was efficient, but the moment he stepped through his front door, he was consumed by loneliness. His thoughts often drifted back to the day he first met Rose, a shy, simple country girl. Her modest nature and beautiful dark skin had drawn him to her. One day, as Rose and the boys were harvesting tomatoes on the farm, a familiar voice called out from behind.
How was I not invited to this harvest?
Without turning around, Rose recognized the voice. The boys shouted,
Daddy.
and ran to embrace him. Rose slowly dropped her tomato basket and moved towards George. She had missed him so much. The last time she saw him in person, they were engaged in a heated argument. She always watched any news about him, especially his governorship debates. He looked different, pale and exhausted.
Baby, I stepped down from the race. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you and my boys. I am sorry for making you play second fiddle to my political career. You and the boys are my everything. Politics means nothing to me if my family is not in the picture.
With those words, Rose hugged him, and they both kissed. George spent the time with her and the boys at her parents' house. The next day, they moved back to Florida. She started her own little farm with the hope of expanding it. George returned to practicing law and began assisting Rose on the farm. Surprisingly, he developed a fondness for farm life, yet he couldn't help but keep up with the upcoming elections and political news. Rose noticed the joy on his face whenever he watched the news and felt guilty. She felt she had taken away his dreams and aspirations. One evening, a year after they returned from Texas, Rose walked to George as he was listening to the political news.
Baby, is it too late to run again?
Run for what?
George asked, puzzled.
I want you to run in the upcoming governorship election.
No, I don't want to. You and the boys are my priority.
Politics has always been your dream. I see how your face lights up when you follow the news. I want you to pursue your dreams, and this time, I'll stand by you. I don't want you to give up your aspirations for me. You have shown me these past months that our family is your priority. Please, run again for my sake.
George was silent for a long time before finally speaking.
You and the boys are my world, and I won't trade you guys for anything. You are right. I allowed my political career to engulf me without creating time for you. I have learned my lessons. If I'm going to run this time, I'll create a balance between work and family.
They embraced and promised to support each other's passions. They agreed to dedicate every Saturday and Sunday to family time, free from work. George managed to secure his candidacy again. Luckily for him, his political team never submitted his withdrawal. They had faith that he would change his mind, and he did. Rose became involved in her husband's political career. She granted interviews. Her popularity grew as a woman with integrity and a good orator who could penetrate the hearts of the people. She understood the needs of the people and was a good advocate for the people. Her profile as a farmer and a well-grounded Christian, who was not judgmental, made George a favorite candidate among the people. Together, they campaigned, and George won the election. Rose became the first Black First Lady of the state, an exceptional one at that. She created an organization where she introduced young children and teenagers to agriculture.